Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day so far. My name is Kate Watts, and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist with Cone Health and the Live Life Well Employee Wellbeing team. So thanks for being here with me. We are going to be going through our webinar on grocery shopping, smart and savvy. And so we've got a bunch of great topics to cover today. And so I am going to jump right in. If you have questions or comments, please type them in the chat box as we go along. I will keep an eye on that. And also just keep in mind that this presentation will be available on the Live Life Well YouTube channel, so you will have access to this recording and all of the information within the PowerPoint slides. So our objectives today are to state the benefits of choosing whole, real foods when we are grocery shopping and preparing our meals. We're going to discuss the cost of healthy foods, which is often stated as a barrier for purchasing healthier foods. And we're going to list strategies for shopping, budgeting, and reducing food waste. So that is where we will spend the bulk of our time today, going over those tips and strategies to stay successful with this in the long run. So let's start off talking about why whole, real foods. What's so important about cutting back on processed foods and getting more nutritious foods into our eating patterns. So I'm just going to share a couple of quotes to kind of set the tone with you today. So the first one is from Hippocrates: "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." So I'm sure you've heard of this quote. And to piggyback on that, Thomas Edison also was quoted saying that the doctor of the future will no longer treat the human frame with drugs, but rather will cure and prevent disease with nutrition. So here at Cone Health and with the Live Life Well Wellbeing team, we definitely recognize that nutrition can be a powerful tool for improving our health outcomes and also for preventing disease. And it really all starts with what we're buying at the grocery store and bringing into our homes to eat. So in America, chronic diseases account for 3 out of 4 deaths, and many chronic illnesses can be improved with proper nutrition, including the big ones like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and stroke, also inflammation and arthritis, kidney disease, liver disease, COPD. And so putting some time and effort into how we are fueling our bodies with nutritious foods can really help us prevent our risk for these chronic diseases and also help us better manage any chronic diseases that we are living with. So with that in mind, why don't we purchase more nutritious foods? Why don't we eat nutritious foods more regularly? Well, the most common reason that people report for not eating nutritious foods is the cost. So some of the things that as shoppers or consumers we think about is, of course, the price of food, which has been going up lately due to many different factors. But it is true that some of our healthy foods are certainly at a higher price point. So things like fresh produce, fresh seafood, leaner, more quality meats, and our nuts and seeds. We often see some pretty big sticker prices on some of those items, which may prevent some people from purchasing them. But also just the prospect of food waste can deter shoppers from trying something new or from trying healthier foods and recipes if they don't want food to go to waste or to spoil, or maybe they just don't even know how to choose and properly store those types of foods. And then another thing is that many families, when they are lacking funds for food, they tend to rely on cheaper boxed products, ultra processed convenience foods that are negatively going to impact our health, but that can be cheaper in the short term than purchasing multiple ingredients to put together a similar meal that is healthier for them. So again, if they're limited on the budget, they may not be able to purchase enough ingredients to create a balanced meal, even though that would actually be cheaper in the long run. But buying those bigger items and having extra, they just need to feed their family that night. And so if they're going for something cheap, that's processed and packaged. So when we think about these perceived costs of food, thinking about what you notice when you're in the grocery store. Many of us have our certain grocery stores we go to, or we kind of know which ones have better deals or are a little bit of a cheaper shopping experience. So with all that in mind, it really does beg the question, are healthy foods really more expensive? And they actually did a study out of Harvard that was published in the British Medical Journal. And they found that even the healthiest diets cost only about $1.50 more per day than the least healthy diets. And so when they were doing this review, the healthy diet was rich in fruits, veggies, fish, and nuts. And the unhealthy diet was rich in processed foods, meats, and refined grains. So at $1.50 more per day, we would be spending less than $550 more a year to consume a healthier diet based with those whole real foods versus processed foods. So when we compare that to some of the other factors we don't always consider, like the cost of our health care if we're not eating and nourishing ourselves well. When we look at an individual who is not managing any chronic diseases, they spend on average about $6,000 a year on their healthcare expenses. Whereas someone who is managing 3 to 4 chronic diseases spends on average $25,000 per year on healthcare expenses. So clearly saving money by improving our health outcomes should nudge us to consider spending a little more on healthy foods to keep ourselves well. So we're going to go into our practical tips for shopping, budgeting, and reducing food waste. And hopefully this will set us up for success in this area, especially when it comes to reducing the cost of eating healthier for the long term. So before we shop, we want to know our budget, and we want to shop our kitchen. We want to have a plan, and we want to create a grocery shopping list. So we're going to go through these steps together. On average, food waste costs individuals $390 per year, and this ends up being over $1,500 per year for a family of 4. So if we can reduce our food waste and reduce the wasted money of food that we throw away, then we can afford to purchase that healthier diet throughout the year. So let's look at some ways to do this. First is really shopping your kitchen before you head out to the grocery store. And so when we do this first, it helps us cut down on food waste and saves us money because we can identify, first of all, things we already have on hand that we don't need to purchase. Things we have on hand that we can use for our meals so that, again, we can have a smaller grocery list each time we go to the store, which would be less money spent at the store each visit. And then also it helps us really identify those perishable items that are about to go bad on us or spoil that we need to use up. And so starting with your refrigerator and looking through, what do I need to use up this week as far as fruits and vegetables or herbs and spices that are going to go bad? So once we've taken kind of an inventory of what we already have on hand, now we can move on to making a plan with that knowledge. This is also helpful, we're going to talk about a little bit later, keeping your kitchen stocked with essentials, and so that you can throw together healthy meals more easily when you do have whole real foods on hand. And so when you're writing this down, you don't need to write down every single thing that you have on hand, just maybe those items you want to use up, or things that you've had in your freezer a while that you're ready to use. And then if you do have some items that are running low that you need to restock on, making a note of any condiments or seasonings or oils that you need to purchase that week. So once we've kind of got an idea of what we have on hand, now we can move into making our plan for our meals and snacks coming up. So making a plan is really essential for both eating healthy and for spending less on our healthy foods because it helps us prioritize our health goals. We can keep that idea of nutrition and balance in the forefront of our minds when we're planning ahead, whereas we may not be so um, focused on that if we are just perusing around the grocery store. When we just go into the store and see what we find or shop the sales, we might be influenced to purchase things just from marketing or sales that don't necessarily align with using up what we have at home and creating balanced, delicious meals. So we can prioritize our health goals. It's going to save us time and money. Just sitting down for 15 to 30 minutes before we go shop will make that shopping trip smoother and more efficient. And it also helps reduce stress around meal times because I feel like a lot of times when people are wanting to choose healthier food items, they go to the store, they see all this beautiful produce, they stock up, they purchase a little bit of everything, and they don't have any plan for how they're actually going to use those items throughout the week. And so we tend to over purchase when we're in that mindset of I'm going to eat healthy this week or I'm going to cook more this week. And then we don't have a plan for when we actually are getting ready to prepare a meal. What do we have time to chop and wash and cook? And how are we going to use certain items? And how am I going to use this all before it goes bad on me? So making that plan reduces that stress around meal times, and it can be fun and delicious. So for me personally, I'm not a strict meal planner, but I do like knowing what types of meals I have all the ingredients for that I can quickly put together. And it makes me happy throughout the day to know what I will be having for dinner. That's something I can look forward to, knowing that I'm going to have a homemade, balanced meal, and I've already got everything I need, and I've probably prepped a couple of the items if I've really thought ahead. So we're going to choose some recipes and meal ideas, but again, this can be as structured or as unstructured as you would like. So it may just be jotting down, okay, I've got this on hand. That would probably be good in some tacos. Maybe this I'll do a stir fry. This I can use with my lunches throughout the week. So just jotting down some ideas after you review the ingredients you have on hand and what comes to mind or what you're in the mood for or what your family has requested lately. And then we want to plan out our meals to incorporate leftovers and helping use up foods that may spoil quickly. So if you need some recipe inspiration, I find it really helpful to keep a binder of your family favorite recipes that are quick and easy and well balanced. Also, some of us prefer to do that more digitally. So maybe keeping some of your favorite recipes favorited or tabbed on your browser, on your computer, or on your phone, or using some of the resources online like I have listed here. So these resources I find are really helpful as in terms of using whole real foods, and the dryum.org website. I love their Meal-O-Matic function, which is you choose the type of recipe you want to prepare, but then you actually tell it what ingredients you have on hand and what you want to use up. And then it creates a personalized recipe for you, which I think is really fun. And you can, very much personalize it to your likes and dislikes. And then I've listed here some with different eating styles. If you want to try out some Mediterranean eating plans, if you want to try out some more plant-based recipes. And then I think even just searching, if you have something you want to use up and you're just really drawing a blank as to what you can cook with it, or you're tired of how you've been preparing it and you need a new, different way to use up that ingredient, just a simple Google search or going to all recipes and typing in that ingredient. But my personal favorite is Simply Recipes. I think they have one of the best search options for types of dishes that you want to prepare, health-focused dishes you want to prepare, or even if cooking methods. So say you want to pull out your Instapot and use that some for the week, that you can type in that into their search function, and it'll bring you a bunch of healthy recipes using a certain cooking method. So feel free to check these out. Again, this will be on our recording on our YouTube page, and I'll link all of these resources in the description once it's posted there as well. And let me know in the comments, let everybody know if you have any favorite recipe resources or websites that you use to spark your creativity when you're planning out meals. So now we're just now getting to making our shopping list. And so the idea of going all through that prep work is that our shopping list is going to ultimately be shorter. Instead of walking around the grocery store and seeing, oh, this item's on sale, I'm going to make this from it, and then having to purchase all the other ingredients to go with it. We now are doing it a little bit backwards, which really is the more logical way to do it, which is, what do I have at my home that I want to use, and what ingredients do I need to buy to supplement turning that into a balanced meal? So review your meal and snack ideas, any recipes you've chosen. And again, don't go too crazy. You don't need a full-on, hour-long recipe for every night of the week. Just 2 or 3 recipes. The rest can be leftover, throw together kind of meals. If you do come across more recipes than that you want to try, again, favorite them or bookmark them or print them and put them in your binder to save for future weeks. And then we're going to look at our on-hand food list, see what we already have, and we're going to write down what we need to buy for our shopping list. And make sure to add any staple items that you're running low on that you cook with regularly. So maybe that's your oils, your herbs or spices, your salt or pepper, your cooking spray, anything that you need to restock on would go on your list at this time as well. So tips for when we are actually shopping. So make sure to bring that shopping list that we have now put some thought into and stick to it. We're going to talk about shopping the perimeter of the store first, which you've probably heard that tip. So we'll go through that visual. We're going to talk about reading nutrition labels, how to compare prices as you shop, the importance of buying in season and buying locally when you can to also help save money. And the golden rule of shopping is to not go hungry. We know if we go hungry, we are going to be putting things in our cart that are not on our list. We're going to be impulse buying things at the checkout for us to snack on our way home. So if you are a little bit hungry and it's time to grocery shop and you don't have time for a meal, then have a snack before you go to manage those impulse buys. So let's get into these shopping tips. Unplanned purchases increase a grocery bill by 10% on average. So that's why we want to stick to our list. Sure, there's going to be a few things that we spot that we want to try, but really trying to stick to your budget and your plan is going to help make shopping for healthier, nutritious items more affordable throughout the year. So shopping the perimeter of the store. Now this is a typical layout of a grocery store. Of course, it's not going to perfectly match every grocery store out there. But generally, when we walk into a store, if we shop around the outside rows first, we are going to hit all of our major food groups, but these are going to be our more wholesome, real foods. Whereas all of our packaged and processed and refined foods are going to be normally more often in those center aisles. And so shopping the full perimeter, trying to fill up our cart and check off our grocery list using those items is going to help us limit, hopefully, the time we spend in the more tempting aisles in the middle. So we've got our fruits and vegetables, our produce section. Normally there's a bakery kind of section with some fresher breads. And then we go through our protein sections, right? Our seafood, our meat and deli, and our dairy. And then we get to our frozen foods, which we'll talk a little bit more about within season, how our frozen items can still be a great option for keeping things stocked that won't go bad on you, or for finding nutritious foods that aren't in season at a more reasonable price. And then when we go into the middle aisles, trying to be really intentional about, again, what is on your list and what you need versus strolling down each aisle where we may be more tempted to pick up less wholesome food items. Now, convenience items certainly have a time and a place in our menus and in our lifestyles, but in general, trying to avoid the visual temptation of the junk food aisles or the supermarket foods that are available. So when we're grocery shopping, our goals are just to choose mostly whole, real foods as if we were at a farmer's market, which is a great option for shopping, but many people enjoy the convenience of getting everything in one at a more supermarket type of store these days. So when you can go to buy local and fresh and in season, you're going to get things more affordably and you're going to have less of the tempting items around. But when you're actually in that supermarket, trying to focus on whole, real foods and a variety of colorful foods. Now, some of these items may still come in a bag or a box. It doesn't have to all be produce and meats and poultry and seafood. But if we look at some of the examples here for some healthy, wholesome snacks, we're going to go over tips for how to identify those using nutrition labels and ingredient list. Things like popcorn or nuts or seeds or pre-washed and cut fruit or vegetables, healthier, more wholesome dips, low-fat dairy items, and fitting in some treat items in your week as well. So in general, when we are thinking about planning our meals, it's helpful to think through how can I get that variety and color in my week. And you've probably seen the portion plate image. It's one that I definitely use a lot. I'm a big fan of this tool. And so it's encouraging us to get variety within and across all of our different food groups. And that variety is going to provide that color and interest on our plates, especially when we're choosing a variety of fruits and vegetables. So I think this concept is definitely helpful during your planning phase, but it can also be helpful to think about when you're grocery shopping. So when we're looking down in our cart, what items take up most of our cart? Now, I will admit my cart these days has a lot more packaged snacks foods than it used to for my 3-year-old who loves a grab and go snack. And so I still try to search out some more wholesome options that are individually packaged. But in general, if we can look down at our cart and see that we have mostly real foods sitting there and less packaged items sitting there, and in a kind of balance that will help us meet these these goals for moderation and variety throughout our week, what we're purchasing is going to set us up for success in that area. So let's go through a couple tips when it comes to each food group and what we're trying to buy more of. So eating the rainbow, you've probably heard that tip a lot, and it is definitely the easiest way to get a great variety of nutrition and make sure we got all of our vitamins and minerals and antioxidants covered. So a variety of vegetables, specifically choosing darker, deeper, brighter colors. They're going to have more nutrition there. 4 to 5 servings per day is the recommended goal for vegetables. So it's not as hard to get there as you think, because a half a cup of cooked vegetables is a serving, or a cup of raw vegetables. If you're having more than that at one meal, you're having more than one serving. But it does mean that we have to be intentional about choosing and eating vegetables at most of our meals and snacks throughout the day. So purchasing those and having a plan for how to use them can help us meet those recommendations. Whole fruits, so choosing more of our whole fruits in their most natural form. The more we process and mess with an item, the often less nutrition, less fiber, and more added sugars or added salt we have in the product. So for example, with an apple being a healthier choice or a more wholesome choice over applesauce, which is going to still have more fiber and nutrients and less sugar than an apple juice, for example. So 2 to 3 servings per day, which would be 1 cup of cut fruit or 1 medium whole fruit the size of your fist. These items are great to have in their whole forms because it makes them really portable. So like I was talking about with my toddler, a banana or apple, throwing that in your bag is just as easy as a packaged processed snack food, right? So I love having those things on hand to throw on our way out the door as well. So when we get to that grains portion of the plate, our goal is to choose more whole grains. And so we're looking for 100% whole grains on the packaging. And sometimes you have to be a little bit of a label detective and not really pay attention to what's on the front of your package, but turn it over and look at the ingredients and looking for 100% whole wheat, whole grain, whatever it may be, as the first ingredient. And so everything we're talking about here today is on a spectrum as well. We don't have to eat 100% raw foods all the time. We certainly don't want to consume 100% packaged processed foods all the time. But in this spectrum, trying to do the best we can, eating more of these nutritious foods. So things like unprocessed whole grains, like your oats and your quinoa and your brown rice. And then lightly processed whole grains that don't have added sugar, like your whole grain pastas and whole grain crackers. And then our whole grain tortillas and whole wheat breads are good options. And then just limiting to less often having the refined grains, which are going to have been stripped of their nutrients, much less fiber, don't keep us full quite as long because they're digested much more quickly, and they often have those added sugars in them as well. So limiting those foods made with the more refined grains. In general, we're trying to make half of our grains each day whole grains. So that's a good middle of the road kind of goal for grains. So now when we get to proteins, we're really trying to emphasize more plant-based proteins, better for us, better for the environment, and often much cheaper than our animal-based proteins. So things like our beans, our nuts, our seeds, legumes, things like lentils. If you want to try out soy products like tofu or tempeh, that's going to be a much more affordable way to get in some quality protein. And then limiting our higher fat, more processed protein options, the most processed being things like our bologna or deli meats or bacon or jerkies, or not all jerkies, but the kind I'm talking about. So the more processed fakey type of meats, and trying to choose more low fat meats like our fish and our poultry, or excuse me, seafood and poultry, especially without the skin on and prepared in healthy ways. That's going to be a very lean source of protein, very healthy for your heart. Leaner cuts of red meat in moderation as well, and low-fat dairy options are good protein sources. So really with protein, trying to get a variety, watching our portion, and preparing it in a healthy way. So limiting the fried versions of any of these items. So lastly, that brings us to our fats, so what we're flavoring our foods with. And so with this spectrum, we're looking at choosing more of the heart-healthy fats that actually give us a benefit to our health, and limiting or avoiding the harmful fats that are going to increase our risk for heart disease. So when we're looking on a food label, which we're going to do next, the healthier fats are your unsaturated fats, and these will be listed as mono and poly unsaturated fats. These foods are typically from plant sources, so your olive oil, your avocados, your nuts and seeds, nut butters. And then also seafood too. So some types of fish have very heart healthy fats, your omega-3 fats that are also found in things like walnuts and chia seeds and flax seeds. And then on the limit side of the spectrum are going to be your saturated fats. So those are the ones that are more commonly from animal products that we want to limit. And these also are going to be higher in your fattier cuts of meat. So trimming meat is always a great option, choosing leaner cuts of meat or leaner poultry and seafood options. And then again, anything made from animal products. So that's going to include things like our butter or lard. And then with trans fats, these are more man-made fats found in packaged processed foods that we really want to avoid. So on the label, we're looking for 0 grams of trans fat. And these can be hidden in foods. They're not used as widely anymore. They're being taken out of our food supply, but you can identify them when you look at the ingredient list as partially hydrogenated oils. So those are the ones we want to really stay away from as they greatly increase our risk of heart disease. So let's look at these labels. I have found that many people are getting more and more comfortable with nutrition labels. It's less and less often that I go through a full-on, tutorial on labels with folks, which I think is great that people are using this tool and getting more familiar with it. Standardized labels are still relatively new as far as being required by law. So, I mean, I say new, they've been around for 50 years, but relatively new in terms of other standard safety measures for consumers, right? So it is a great tool, but it's got a lot of information. It's very busy looking. So we kind of want to break this down a little bit. I'm just going to highlight a few things today, which is that we always want to look at the serving size, because when you're comparing products, they may have different serving sizes. And so then you're not comparing apples to apples. You've got to do a little math, a little conversion to truly compare an item to make sure those serving sizes match. Also important is that this nutrition information is for one serving, not necessarily for the whole container. So you really want to check that out first before you start looking at the numbers. Now, this label has highlighted what we're trying to limit and what we're trying to get more of. So as I mentioned, the saturated and trans fat we want to limit. Sodium we want to limit, which again is going to be higher in packaged processed foods and less present in our natural wholesome foods. Fiber is one thing we actually want to choose more of. And so many of our high fiber foods like fruits and vegetables aren't going to have a nutrition label, but other items like our dried beans or canned beans are going to have a really good dose of fiber. So those are great things to pick up and supplement with your meal plan. So we'll look at fiber here in a moment. Sugars are now split up into added sugars as a subcategory, and we really want to limit those added sugars, which even healthy looking foods like dried fruits can often have hidden added sugars in them. So really being a detective and flipping a product over and reading the label is a great way to know what's really in your food that you're purchasing. So before we get into some tips for fiber, which is naturally going to increase when you're choosing more wholesome real foods, I do want to touch on my favorite way to use this tool, which is the percent daily value. So instead of having to memorize all of the recommendations for grams and milligrams per day, looking at percent daily value is a really quick guide to know if a food is a good source of a certain nutrient. So in general, if the daily value is 5% or less, that is a low amount of that particular nutrient. So for sodium or saturated fat, that would be a good thing. For something like fiber, we actually would want a higher source. And so 20% or more is considered high for items that we're trying to get more of. So I think that that's a helpful, just quick guideline when you're viewing nutrition labels. So choosing fiber-rich foods. Fiber is a miracle worker for our health, and it is again, the more we process and mess with even these healthy items, the more fiber they lose. And so why do we want to keep these intact? Why do we want more fiber? It makes our body work a little harder to digest those foods, which helps our digestive system. It helps keep us regular. It lowers cholesterol. Cholesterol actually gets trapped in this fiber and exits our body instead of getting absorbed into our body when we have fiber-rich foods in our diet. It can help us with weight loss and blood sugar control because it keeps us fuller and more satisfied for longer. So it's great for appetite management. And it is found in all of our plant foods. So our fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, beans and legumes. So how can we increase the fiber content of our meals? Fiber is in the bulk of the plant foods, the fibrous parts of the food. So that's the skins, that's the pulp. And so for parts, those foods that have edible parts that are fibrous, consuming them, keeping those skins on your food and cleaning them to consume them is a great way to get in additional fiber. Also, when we're cooking our fruits and vegetables, or our vegetables, quickly steaming them so that they remain crunchy and colorful. You know, here in the South, we like to put them in a pot and let them go all day. And you're still consuming vegetables, but we can keep more of that nutrition intact if we're doing more quick cooking methods and leaving them a little crispy. Cooking with our whole grains, so adding in oats, bran, chia or flax seeds, whole grain flour into our favorite recipes, pancakes, waffles, muffins, even meatloaf. You can throw some oats in there and get that little extra burst of fiber and nutrition. Brown rice, barley, quinoa, these are great filling foods to use to get more of a variety instead of just, pasta all the time as our base or something like that. So trying to branch out and try more of those whole grains in addition to any whole wheat pasta or breads you may be purchasing. And then beans, as I mentioned, are an excellent source of fiber. They're one of the best ways to boost your fiber intake. And so if you like beans, having them 2 to 3 times a week, adding them to soups, having them cold on top of salads, using them as a meat substitute in dishes like tacos or stir fries, making them into dips or spreads are some great ways to get extra servings of beans in. Now, I will mention as we're increasing fiber, you want to also increase your water. And you do want to increase fiber gradually. So if you're really working on eating more fiber or more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, again, gradually doing that to allow your digestive system to get used to that different load of fiber so that you can do this in a comfortable way. Let me know if you have questions or comments as we're moving along here. I saw someone who loves the Dr. Yum website. Absolutely. Y'all got to check that one out. It's very cute. So I'm going to go into now the usefulness of reading the ingredient list as well. So looking at nutrition labels, you're going to get the most information, especially if you're managing certain health conditions and you're maybe more focused on limiting your sodium or limiting your sugar intake. But I think ingredient lists can be really helpful comparing brands as well, or identifying if something says natural or organic on the front, maybe turning it over and still looking at what exactly is going into that recipe by looking at the ingredients. And so the example I'm going to use is my favorite one, peanut butter. I'm a peanut butter lover. And there's a huge spectrum in terms of types of peanut butter and how they are made and how nutritious they are or not. So the example I'm given here is a reduced fat peanut butter. So someone that's watching their heart health or trying to lose weight, that may be a trigger to reach for, reduced fat. That's better for my heart, right? But not necessarily. So when we look at this ingredient list, we see the first ingredient is peanuts, thank goodness. But our next ingredient, which means it's the second highest used ingredient, the next biggest amount in the recipe, is corn syrup solids, and then sugar, and then soy protein, and then salt, fully hydrogenated vegetable oils, and then a bunch of words I don't really understand. So looking at the ingredient list when you're trying to shop for wholesome foods, it's super helpful to look and see, is this something I could recreate in my own kitchen? Are these ingredients that I understand and that I could purchase individually and then put together? So especially things like dips, hummus or tzatziki or salsa or whatever that I'm purchasing at the store. Sometimes it's much more convenient to buy those already made instead of making it myself. But checking the ingredients, I can make sure that it's real foods that were put into that product that I'm purchasing. So let's look at our more natural peanut butter options. So we've got one that is peanuts, sugar, palm oil, and 2% or less of salt and molasses. So better than the other processed one, right? Still has some sugar and added oil. Then we've got peanuts and 1% or less of salt. So that would be a great option. I think, anything with just peanuts and salt, I normally go for. Or if we want to go all the way, one ingredient food, peanuts. Blend it up. There's your peanut butter. So you can go anywhere in this spectrum, but I think using the ingredient list really helps me feel better about what I'm purchasing and putting into my body when I can understand the words on the ingredient list. Okay, so let's talk about comparing prices just briefly. A lot of the tips we've gone over is already going to help us reduce our grocery bill, but I do think it's very helpful to, very savvy to compare prices when you are in the store. And so when you see sales or, markdown prices or your frequent flyer card discounts, it still may not be the cheapest option to what else is on that aisle. And so you do want to still look and compare prices rather than blindly using coupons or deals that you have. Maybe it is the best deal, maybe it's not. Shopping store brands can be a really helpful way to reduce costs. On average, they're going to be 25% lower in price, and many of the products are very similar in quality to their name brand counterparts. So considering trying some store brands, especially for things like nuts or seeds or trail mixes that are some of those typically more expensive healthy items. And then the best tip that I ever learned was checking the unit price to compare products, especially if they are different sizes. Even a slightly different size, say olive oil, the unit price really helps me pick a more affordable option. So for example, most of us look at the retail price, so what we're going to be spending that day. And so when we look at the retail price of these yogurts, because one is only 6 ounces and one is a much larger container, 32 ounces, it looks like the low-fat yogurt is less expensive. But when we compare the unit price, we see that the 32-ounce low-fat yogurt is actually 7 cents cheaper per ounce. So if I only needed one 6-ounce yogurt, like maybe that's all I'm going to eat, and if I was to buy a 32 ounce, it would go to waste, then that might be the best choice. However, if I was going to purchase a handful of these 6-ounce low-fat yogurts and eat them throughout the week, it would actually be cheaper to get the 32 ounce because it is only 5 cents per ounce, whereas the smaller containers are 12 cents per ounce. So I find this really helpful when shopping for protein items as well, looking at the unit price. And a lot of things that are in a bottle or a jar, like, maple syrup, for example, unit price can really help you find the brand that you're going to get a bigger bang for your buck. So you're purchasing a little bit more up front, but if you're going to actually use that item, it's going to be worth that extra spend. It's going to last you longer. Another great tip that I think a lot of us are aware of is to buy in season It's going to save us so much money, and it tastes so much better as well. So in season and local when you can, because again, those are going to be the freshest items. They haven't had to travel on a boat or in a truck for however many weeks to get to you. So for example, strawberries can be 100% more expensive in December than they are right now, strawberry season in the spring in North Carolina. So buying in season or going to a local farmer's market, you are going to get the best deals on your produce items. But if it's not in season, how can we save money on these healthy, wholesome foods and get that variety in our diets? That is the nice part about having an international food system now, having access to these foods all year round. So if it's not in season, frozen produce is a great option. And canned can be as well, with a few considerations. So when we talk about, for example, strawberries, and you want some strawberries in December, frozen produce like strawberries with no sugar added, it's been flash frozen back in the spring when it was picked at its fresh, at its peak of freshness. And so nutritionally, it's going to be probably better than the ones that are traveling from a different country that time of year. And it's going to be very affordable. So I think frozen produce for both fruits and vegetables are great options to have on hand, and especially the steamable ones that you can quickly have a serving of vegetables ready to go that are going to be in your freezer waiting for you, never going to go bad. Well, never, but rarely going to go bad on you, is a great option. And then with canned versions as well, because these can certainly be affordable. Looking for no salt added or low sodium canned versions of your vegetables if they're not in season. And then for canned fruits, just looking for those in water or their own juice, and avoiding the kinds that are packaged in syrup that's going to have a bunch of added sugar. And then sometimes, if you do really want something fresh, you don't want to do frozen or canned, and you've got a recipe and the item you need isn't in season, so they just don't look very good or they're really expensive, then trying to find a substitution. So a produce item, a fruit or vegetable that is in season that would work for that recipe as well, can be a fun challenge if you're up for it. So I also want to just briefly touch on the questions around organic food. Should I spend more on organic food? So nutritionally, quite honestly, there is not going to be a big difference in the amount of nutrients in an organic food versus a food that's been treated with preservatives or pesticides, right? But when we talk about our health and what we're putting into our body and choosing the most wholesome natural foods possible, then certainly choosing organic foods is going to reduce our intake of pesticide residue and things that have been used to treat our produce items to keep them bug-free and disease-free. So certainly if you can budget for organic foods, they are a great option. They're also going to be much better for the environment. If you are on a strict budget, personally, I like to use the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. They come out with this list every year. So this is the 2023 list that I'm about to share with you. And the link is there at the bottom as well. So the Dirty Dozen are the top 12 produce items that have the highest measured amounts of pesticide residue. And so if you can't afford to buy these organically, then washing these is just as efficient. Of course, you're not helping the environment side of things, but you are helping your body. So using a vegetable scrub solution and rinsing them really well before you consume them is adequate. But things like strawberries, if it's not from an organic farm, are going to have quite a bit of residue there. Our greens, peaches and pears often make the list. Apples almost always make the list. Some of our berries, peppers, cherries, green beans actually are on the list this year as well. So these would be items to prioritize purchasing organic if you can. And I will say too, if there's an item on this list that you buy all the time, for me, that's apples and strawberries. Like I always have them on hand. Then they may be, since you're consuming more of them, might be something you want to switch to organic on if you can. Whereas the Clean 15 list are the lowest rated items in terms of pesticide presence when they measure the amounts in the foods. And also things that you aren't going to be eating the outer peel. You typically can get away with not purchasing organic. So avocados, corn, pineapple, onions, papaya, peas, asparagus, melon, kiwi, cabbage, mushrooms, mangoes, sweet potatoes, watermelon, and carrots are all on the list for 2023. So these are ones that if you're trying to decide what to splurge on for organic and what to go with the traditional options, these are going to be, you can feel a little bit safer consuming these even if they're not organic. Let me know if you have questions about that. I think it's a great resource and a great thing to highlight that we don't always talk about. So let's wrap up today here talking about some tips for success and really just getting organized, getting in your own groove of what this looks like for you or for you and your family. I'm going to talk a little bit about some tips for or some benefits of online grocery shopping. We're going to talk about choosing and storing produce, and I've got a couple more resources for you all as we finish up today. So when we talk about organization, that really is going to equal sustainable success for us. So getting into a routine with how often you grocery shop, what that little preparation, making your list, what does that look like? Is it a sit down moment for 20 minutes one day of the week, or is it something you have on your phone that you're constantly updating the notes on throughout the week, creating that list as you go? But just being protective of your time for making that a priority. Again, whatever we bring into our home, what we shop and purchase is ultimately going to have a big influence on the food choices we make throughout that week. So another tip to get organized is to allow yourself a few times a year to do a little revamp where you clean out your cupboards, you clean out your pantry and your fridge, you reorganize. You make things that are healthy, eye level and just appealing when you look into your fridge or your pantry. You put items that maybe you don't use as often or that are less healthy options, a little bit more out of sight. So cleaning out your area, getting organized, and then keeping your kitchen and workspace clean and inviting, so that on a busy week, we actually want to get in there and put on some music and enjoy the process of cooking. So if you need to recruit other members of your household to help keep that area tidy and clean, so that you want to get in there and use the items you've purchased more easily. I think another great tip is to keep your kitchen stocked with essentials so that you do have some freedom to throw together meals or snacks, because you have a couple, staple items on hand that can help create an actual dish or well-balanced meal or snack from some of the wholesome foods that you've purchased that week. So in your pantry, keep in beans and legumes. That's an easy way to bulk up a meal. Same with oats and grains, having healthy snacks on hand like nuts and seeds. Again, if you want to stock up on some low sodium canned foods, I find that a no salt added tomato sauce is something I keep a lot. A mixed vegetable kind of thing is helpful. So just any kind of go-tos that you can fit into many different recipes to keep on hand. Same with frozen foods, especially if you do come across a really good deal and you want to maybe stock up on a favorite protein item that's on sale. So keeping those in your freezer. Freezing vegetables, we didn't even talk about freezing produce before it goes bad today, but you can freeze just about anything. So when you're doing that initial step going through your kitchen, if there's something about to go bad and you're only going to be cooking once or twice that week, or when you're going out of town, freezing those items is a great way to reduce food waste as well. Fresh produce. So this is something you kind of want to restock each time you shop and try to only buy what you're actually going to use during that period. But potatoes and onions are great things to keep on hand all the time that go well in lots of different recipes. And then, of course, your herbs and spices, your oils, any kind of dairy products you may use frequently in your recipes, or a plant-based milk that you always want to keep on hand. Having this just continually stocked, it makes it a lot easier when you're making your list. You know, these are things you always have. And if you're running low, you just jot it down. But I really do think it helps reduce food cost as well, because you can shop the deals and buy one for this week, two for later, and freeze it, or have a shelf stable item so that you're saving money in the long term when you find deals and shop deals like that. Online grocery shopping. If you've tried it, you probably think it's the best thing ever. I know I was definitely hooked during the pandemic. I actually am someone that likes to go to the grocery store and browse around, go figure, being a dietitian. But it is a great way to save time and money. It's because it's so convenient, but it's going to really help reduce temptation for impulse buying of items you would visually see in the store. And it really helps you stay on budget because you see that running total. You can compare items and quickly, shop the best prices. There's electronic coupons you can use when you're online. And then for me, it's just that running total. I know how much I'm going to spend before I check out. And that is, I think, my favorite part of online shopping compared to being in the store. Also, you can jump up and see if you have something in your fridge or pantry if you can't remember. So you kind of avoid buying items that you already have on hand. And you can know ahead of time if they're out of something, and figure out a substitution or switch your plan around to accommodate, without having to figure that out in your head when you're in the store. So I encourage you to try it out if you never have before. Sometimes there's a fee for delivery, but most of them do a free pickup option. But you do want to do it ahead of time because those time slots will fill up, especially around like a holiday weekend or something. Everyone taking advantage of it. So definitely think that is a great tip that people often share works well for them trying to purchase healthier foods on a budget. So these I really just included as a resource for you. This website was a great resource for produce, and it goes through this chart of where and how to store your produce, whether in the refrigerator, if it needs to be in a cool and dry place, if it needs to be in a dark place, or if you can leave it out room temperature. And also it was really interesting talking about things that need airflow and things that need to be sealed and in a bag. And so I love that it went through those recommendations and then how long the shelf life is. And then also this chart includes foods that you don't want to store together. So there's ethylene producing foods, which is a gas that comes off of things like apples. And then there are foods that are very sensitive to that gas and it will make them spoil more quickly. And so this has the list of items you do not want to store next to each other. So for example, you don't want for mangoes to be close to your apples and pears. So I thought that was very helpful. So this goes through some of our fruits, and then they've got some for things like onions or garlic that you want out loose or in an open container, that you don't want to put in the refrigerator or in a plastic bag. And then it's got our greens. The other thing to keep in mind with storing produce is moisture is the worst enemy to our produce. So we do want to clean our produce like we talked about with organic items, but if at all possible, do it right before consuming it. so that it's not stored with extra moisture. If you are washing it ahead of time, drying it really, really well before you store it in the way that is recommended. So I encourage you to check out that resource, as well as some additional resources that I've included. The American Heart Association has a really helpful grocery guide that has a checklist grocery item handout that I really like, and tips on the nutrition label, and shopping for their heart healthy check guide that you may recognize on products at the store. And then I also included a meal planning toolkit that has printable on-hand list, meal planning list, grocery shopping list. So it kind of takes you through the steps of shopping and planning in that way. And they're really bright and colorful and easy to use. So again, those links will be available on our Live Life Well YouTube page for you to check out as well. So thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope that this was useful information for you, and we hope to see you in our future webinars. Hope you all have a great day.